Guten Tag. Wie geht's? Meine Schwester has blaue Augen and blonde Haare. And that is the full extent of my German. So now we'll switch to English. And I speak English quite fast. So if at any point we get a bit carried away, put your hand up and I'll turn back to a normal speed. But there's quite a lot that I would like to cover. And I know that we're running slightly late. We've got the precedent set up. If I'm going to tell you anything about me, I have to start at the beginning of the story, and the beginning of the story starts here. This is me, aged 19, with the very first startup. It was about nightclubs and record labels and putting on events and car parks, and I didn't really know what I was doing, but I have always held completely true to an idea that I'm here to make some kind of difference. The problem is, throughout my life, I've never really felt like I know what the fuck I'm doing. So even though I have such a clear sense of purpose, I have a really vague sense of action. But here I was, thinking that I was changing the world. I have no idea how putting on raves was changing the world, other than dancing until 6 in the morning is inherently good for you. Beyond that, it was very confusing. If you fast forward 20 years, this is my last act as CEO of an organization that today I felt increasingly at home. We too set out to try and discover whether marketing could be more than just annoying. In the spirit that you've all come here. I'd promised the agency, I'd set it up, and we work very much with young people about changing young people's world, seeing if we can work with the world's biggest brands, from Netflix to PlayStation, to give young people who come from very little opportunity the chance to find all of their opportunity and realize who they're going to be in their life. It's both an agency and a social enterprise. It's a remarkable place, and it's a warehouse not dissimilar to this, where young people from all walks of life come and they have these incredible engagements with clients. Clients have engagements with young people they never would have normally trusted in the street, and a chemistry takes place between these two things. And I'd promised, having set this thing up when I was 23, that I would leave and step back when I was old. I was asked what old was, so I said 40. Because at 23, 40 seems like the apocalypse, right? It's just never gonna happen. This is just after my 40th birthday. We won the Grand Prix for one of the biggest awards in the UK, not just for a body of work, but for changing the way the industry works. A shift towards a more purposeful business model for the agency landscape. And this is my team taking the notion of me stepping back, literally, because that's my hair at the very back, and they were kicking me back off the stage, because it was my last act as CEO as we handed over. And whilst I was proud, I was also perplexed, because it was 2017, and you know what? The world didn't seem that much better, and for someone who'd spent 20 years trying to change the world, I was looking out on a landscape of frustration and of division on every side of me. In my own country, a binary vote had taken place that did not represent what I thought the true frustrations were, nor does it today. Across the pond, an election had taken place, and this challenge seemed unanswered by my entire life trying to change the fucking world, and I felt a little disappointed. So I took another direction. A little bit too old, I took a complete pivot. So the story goes to another place. This is the other main character. This is Scarlett Victoria. She's my daughter. She's currently 6 3/4. The 3/4 is very important, as anyone who's got children will be well aware. She wouldn't want me to make any mistakes about that. This is the day the book was out, the day before the book was out, actually, in London. The little bookshop at the end of my street. She'd got her pocket money and she went to buy her first copy of the book. And she opened it up and she flicked through. 6-year-old reading this business book. And she saw her name at the front. She was really excited. And then she made probably still the best, most acute, critical observation of the book I've ever received. She said, "Daddy, how did you write a book about pirates with no pictures in it?" It's like, fuck, you're right, darling. And I said, well, kind of it's partly about those pirates, but it's about the modern day, and I'm just frustrated, my love, that the world you're going to inherit, we're not going to get there by following orders or doing what we're told, so it's kind of about rule breaking. She's like, all right, Daddy, thanks, I get it. And at the end of that week, we got a call from the deputy principal of her school saying, what has happened to Scarlett, who's usually such a nice girl? She's like pushing her friends over and pulling jackets off the wall and throwing books on the floor, and it was a real problem. It was a real problem for me, actually, because my ex-wife took the phone call, and she tells me that she's planning to write a book called Be Less Pirate, which I really love. That's her joke, and I've stolen it. So I tried to find a different way of exploring it to Scarlett, and I said, honey, the thing is, as I observe it, the problem is that we've inherited a business model from the latter part of the 20th century, a business model that, unbeknownst to us, was always based on a single fundamental idea. An idea was exploitation. Every single business model that we've seen through that period of time was either exploiting natural resources, and we've now run out of natural resources and are heading towards a climate crisis, or of human resources, and we're now heading towards a crisis of our own anxiety and identity. Neither one of those seems fit for purpose as we head towards the midpoint of the 21st century, and every single conversation that I'm involved with around purpose is peripherally around the edges, and there is nothing that's addressing the central model, the model that needs re-engineering, a new business model that's going to take us towards the place that we go, that isn't going to continue to be part of the problem but part of the solution. And the problem is that I think the places of leadership and change where this typically comes from are not incentivized towards the level of radical change that's required. So there is no way this change is coming apart from the middle, and that's only going to happen if someone is willing to step up and break some fucking rules to re-engineer the way we do things around here. Which is... Thank you. Which is also, it turns out, no way whatsoever to explain anything to a 6-year-old. So I found a final way to explain it to Scarlett, and that weekend, just after the book was out, this statue was unveiled in Parliament Square in Westminster in the centre of London. This is, for those who don't recognise her, Millicent Fawcett, one of the pioneers of the suffragette movement, the first statue of a female ever in Parliament Square, finally recognised for what she did. And I told Scarlett the story of what Millicent did, and how in the moment that Millicent was fighting for the rights that Scarlett and every other woman enjoys, she was doing the wrong thing. But it was okay because she knew she was doing the right thing. And this is the paradox that I think is interesting. Sometimes in all of our lives, it is essential to do the wrong thing because it's the right thing to do. And as Scarlett began to ask, we looked at the other statues in the square, and I'm no historian, as you'll find out if you ever read my book about pirates. But I know enough to tell the story of Winston Churchill and Nelson Mandela, and suddenly we began to realize that every single statue around us is there for the moment in which someone broke the rules. We don't give statues to people who follow orders. That's not what it's about. Our heroes are made in the moment that they defy what they know to be wrong, and they take a risk on doing what they think to be right. Scarlett came back from school the following week, and she was telling me about Rosa Parks that they'd studied in class, and she said, "This is a rule breaker, Daddy." She couldn't have been more right. We've been talking about Picasso. It's because it's this level of prescience. There's an ability to see what's coming next and an ability to make a judgment on what you're doing to begin to determine the rules that are yet to come. That is the opportunity of all this. And we know there is no shortage of them. We look outside these walls, and sometimes I fear that the conversations we have inside are too small because the rules that need challenging are big and they are serious. They are the erosion of democracy that has been fought hard for. They are the challenge, the crisis that faces our climate that so many of our businesses historically have contributed to. And there is an epidemic level of anxiety amongst us as individuals seeking answers for our identity. Now, I don't mean to get heavy after what's been a really enjoyable and inspiring day, but by God, if those aren't the challenges within the scope of our targets, right, then we need to widen the aperture. It's not enough just to get our technology ready for next year or find new ways to hit our targets. These are the goals, these are the rules that need defying, these are the norms that we've inherited, and our children will inherit. And we know that there aren't any answers. We can't con ourselves, no matter all the intelligence and sophisticated systems that we've heard today. The only real preparation is to prepare for total uncertainty. And if you want to dive a little bit more into that, there is one thing that I'd recommend that you read. It's a paper called Deep Adaptation. How many of the room have read it, just for my own knowledge? I would urge you to Google it, the Deep Adaptation White Paper. It's the most scientifically evidenced understanding of the change, the level of uncertainty that we really face as a fallout of climate crisis, and then everything connected to it, rather than sometimes the hyperbole or the media stories. But it was refused to be published by New Scientist. But I think for once it gives you a sense into the level of uncertainty that actually we might need to prepare for and understand our own need to leave conversations like today with a level of certainty that is sometimes a level of self-deceit. And it's understandable, right? Because this is how we've all grown up. There was always going to be someone who was going to come and save us. There was always supposed to be someone. But there isn't. We know this to be the case. Now, there are some that will tell us there's a smart app somewhere in Silicon Valley being invented by some clever dudes with great teeth and really quirky surnames. But we need to call bullshit behind the fucking unicorns trotting out of that place. The level of arrogance and independence from democracy or consistent thought around this, there isn't going to be an app to cure social inequality. There just isn't. And some of you might be thinking, well, this isn't on us. Don't put this on us. We've got leaders that are dealing with this. But we know that is simply not the case. Look at it from whichever perspective you like, but if you're looking at it from my perspective, in particular today, we know this isn't the case, and I'm still a sucker. I can't resist an invitation to go and meet the Prime Minister or the central office at number 10. I've been doing it for years. I've been an ambassador for the UK government for social enterprise. But I only go because one day I'm hoping that I'm going to discover the secret corridor where under the stairs there's some civil service ninjas who've actually got a 10-year master plan. I like to make that joke because everybody knows it's not true. So it's a question of leadership. If it's a question of leadership, then the only leaders that we need are the ones that I'm looking at now. It's on us. It really is. All of this. So there's one other option, which is we could complain. And I'm English, so complaining is really what we do very, very well. And we could spend the rest of this moment just sending each other funny memes about the shit that we're in. And that would be fun. But it won't get us anywhere. So if resistance isn't going to work and no one else is going to come and sort it out, then what the hell am I talking about? I, my friends, am talking about a rebellion. That is the spirit. We've heard the words of innovation and transformation and disruption. Fine, I get it and I understand it. I invoke the spirit of rebellion because I don't think anything less than that spirit is going to get us anywhere near the change that's required. The challenges are huge. Most of our ideas are not meeting them in terms of their scale. Our pace is nowhere near that which is about to happen to us. And I know rebellion's a scary word. We need civil order, right? And rebellion spells civil unrest. So if I'm going to call a rebellion, I'm going to call a sexy, cool Star Wars rebellion. But we need to be ready to do things that we haven't done before if we're going to get anywhere. And that's hard, right? Because who do we really look to? There's not that many people. I had to find a fucking Star Wars picture to talk about rebellion, like that really indicate this now. We're facing a crisis of imagination at leadership in most of our institutions, a vacuum of imagination amongst global leadership. So where do we look to? Well, in these moments, I think it's wise to often look to history, to understand the moments when we, few small human beings, have resisted the tide of intolerance and we've stood up and we've changed the world. And there's no shortage of examples, those that we know really well. But then I found a group that we don't know so well, a group that are fitting for this moment, a group that I believe are probably the role models that you deserve, and they fit in this gap. And they are the golden age of pirates. And it goes a bit quiet at that point, doesn't it? Wait a minute, I was with him there, I was all ready for a fight, and now he's suggesting that we should put Jack Sparrow next to the civil rights movement. Does this man not know his history? Show some respect. Well, I understand, right? Because you haven't gone on the journey with pirates that I've gone on, and we're about to go there, and I know the starting point, so let's be honest, right? The starting point for most people for pirates is here. And that's okay. You know, we have this weird love-hate relationship. We know that they're murderous bastards, but we know that there's some kind of weird quasi-socialist part of their background and history, so what's all that about? And yet we'll let our children go to fancy dress-themed parties as pirates. Scarlett's been to 3 pirate-themed dress this year. There's no other murderous rogues from history that we allow that to happen to. There's never been an invite to a Pablo Escobar-themed children's party. Not once, and I know, I've tried to suggest it a few times. Sorry, that's a really bad joke. So we cast that to the past, and I'd like to introduce you to those who are my pirate heroes, and possibly the innovators and role models that we need right now. So, ladies and gentlemen, here we have Black Sam Bellamy, age 28. He was one of the most fantastic and fearsome pirates. Infamous as he was for his ability to steal the already stolen Spanish gold, he was even more famous for his articulate execution and takedown of church, government, and nascent big business, arguing for the equality and fairness for the ordinary people. Here we've got Edward Teach, a.k.a. Blackbeard, the most famous of all pirates, and that's because he was the inventor of the pirate archetype, the brand. Everything we know and are familiar with about pirates comes from this man. He was so dedicated to living the brand that he would set light to his own beard to rain down the smoking vision of hell and fury upon his hapless victims, not because he was a violent psychopath who liked a bit of fancy dress. Quite the opposite. There's no record of Blackbeard ever killing anyone in history. He didn't have to because his brand was so strong. And here we've got Black Caesar, one of the very many black pirates, because 150 years before the abolition of slavery, pirates understood the power of diversity and were releasing people of color into their communities with equal say, equal pay, and equal rights. And talking of equality, here we have the queen of pirates, Anne Bonny, one of the most incredible stories of absolute fearlessness, leading her pirate troops from the front, taking on all comers, and in so doing, demonstrating one of the few positions of female leadership and equality in the world, which ironically was taking place underneath the skull and crossbones. These are the stories that were covered up at the end of the golden age of pirates exactly 300 years ago. And they were covered up because not they were out stealing gold and drinking rum, but because they threatened the age of empire. And what they promised was a new dawn of a level of democracy that hadn't been seen before, a new sophistication, a new type of organizations. And they were the threat. They were the millennials of their hour. The average age was 28. The average size of a pirate crew was about, average size of a pirate crew was about 80 odd people. You're forming into pirates right in front of me. And these were the stories that span around the world of a new way of doing things, of a new way of organizing, and genuine rebellion that led to change. If you want an example, right, from the first-hand documents I found, how pirates were discussed at the time, you could do worse than this slightly trite comparison. Like, not people that everyone loves or hates, but recognizes and respects for their role in doing things differently, for their roles in challenging and changing and setting out new levels of sophistication and new organizations. Let me give you some examples, right, to really prove this isn't just rhetoric or someone who's obviously overexcited about pirates. So a couple of facts. Global branding. We're all marketeers. We all think that it's Coca-Cola who invented the global brand with the signature swoosh. Well, it wasn't, of course. It was the skull and crossbones invented by Calico Jack Rackham, which was demonstrated and designed deliberately to be a meme that would go viral around the world. And like all good marketeers, you know that every brand has to have a singular message. The skull and crossbones is surrender or die. From a morality point of view, we can come back to that. But nonetheless, it drove their bottom line considerably, and they were the least violent people on the sea at the time, much less so than the Spanish Armada or the Dutch Navy or certainly the bloody British. So you had this story that demonstrated how they would deliver. There was a level of suffrage on board pirate ships. There was a code that allowed every single member of the community to have an equal vote on all matters. It was such a representative democracy, they could even outvote the captain at any given moment, more representative than anything that had been seen at the time. There was a system of dual governance. It was called into question earlier on the notion that culture beats strategy. On board a pirate ship, the quartermaster was elevated to the same place as captain. One given chance, control of culture, one given charge of strategy, to stop the kind of excesses that had gone before and to create a system of checks and balances, a two-house system that predates the Parliament Act, the Charities Act, or even the Companies Act. There was a level of diversity where women folk and people of colour were given a level of equality that hadn't been seen anywhere else in the world at that time. I can go on. There was a level of pay equality, the world still is trying to keep up with. There was no gender pay gap whatsoever on a pirate ship. Every single person was paid equally and in accordance with the level of the haul that they got. An incredibly sophisticated measure. There was a notion of facilitative leadership. We were talking about holacracy earlier on today. It was seen exactly on board a pirate ship, flat structures that weren't been seen anywhere since and have only just about caught up with them. There was a degree of social insurance on board pirate ships. If you lost a leg on board a pirate ship, you got 850 pieces of 8. You could retire on that shit. Whereas if you were in the Navy, you'd be left for dead. That didn't become an inalienable human right until 1945. I could go on. Outside of the sophisticated level of organizations, on board a pirate ship, there was a same-sex marriage so sophisticated it even had an inheritance clause. If one partner died, the other inherited their booty. Right? This is incredible, a level of innovation within a 30-year period. And if you're still not convinced, then we're not far away from the drinks. There's possibly one final fact. Pirates invented the cocktail. It's a true story, my friends. Sir Francis Drake put together rum, lime, mint, and sugars and invented the mojito 200 years before the old-fashioned was invented in New York. These are all matters of facts, all true stories, all facts. A level of innovation that takes place when a small group of people decide to stand up and rebel, and that is the invitation that we have now. In other words, pirates fuck shit up. Now, I always feel a little bit awkward saying that, although I quite like putting it on big screens. But the reason that it's there is because as I was creating and crafting this book, I'm dyslexic, I never went to university, I'm not an academic, it was my first ever book, and so I was workshopping it. I was taking an agile approach, as we'd think about it, and taking the content into workshops and conferences and seeing what the response was. And in particular, I was keen to get out of my own bubble. So I was in Athens, I was in Johannesburg, I was in Baltimore, I was in tough environments where entrepreneurs, where businesses are really leading the change. And it was in Soweto, in South Africa, where these two young guys stood up and they go, "We get it, Sam, we get it. Pirates fuck shit up." I was like, no, that's not what I mean. This isn't a destructive act. And they're like, no, you don't get what we mean. In South African slang, fuck shit up means to go out and be the change. So I'm like, yeah, I fucking love that. I'm going to put that on the front of the book. But I didn't. Mainly, I was just trying to avoid a cliche that I was going to become, right? You know, middle-class, middle-aged white dude, leaves marketing agency, writes book, and becomes public speaker. And it's cliche I haven't avoided. So the quote that I did put on the front of the book was this, because I was pitching the book to Penguin, and we all know about pitches, right? You make shit up. So I thought, right, books have quotes on the front, so I stuck this famous Steve Jobs quote on the front of the book, and I got about halfway through, and I realized the creative director assumed that I had permission from the Jobs estate. So I just kept quiet. And it's now on the front of the book. But it's out in America, so I'm expecting to get sued this year. The other quote that I really like, though, as well as these unexpected pirate stories from history I found pirate economists who argue that ever since the golden age of pirates, 300 years ago, time and time again, at the dawn of the internet, the advances in biotechnology, as we head into space exploration, there are these moments when being more pirate becomes a legitimate tool for all of you to use. One, in the discovery of new territories, when we need new opportunity, and other when there's stasis, when there's stagnation, when things need shaking up. These are the chances. This is when we step out and become more pirate. And you see it again and again and again throughout time. And there's a reason for it. There was a royal cartographer at the time. There were 12 licenses given to anyone to make maps. And that was because, largely, the king wanted people to not go where they hadn't already, I don't know, raped and pillaged the rest of the world. And they didn't want anyone discovering the new world until they had. So at the edges of the maps, at the edges of the known world, they would write, "There be dragons." So no one else would go off the side of the map, except for pirates, because pirates willingly head towards fear. I asked this question in the workshop we just ran, and I'll divert and ask it now. Whom on their schedule over the next 3 weeks, because that's usually how people are blocked up, has got something in their diary that really scares them? Hands up. Okay. This is about the norm. So that was about 10 people in a room of just shy of about 150 left. It's about 10% usually. Now, I don't want to pass observation on this, but there's something to be drawn, the strength from going off the edge of the map in facing fear. You know every single time you've done something that scared you and you overcame it, you grew as a professional. Now, it's 2019, and I'm on the right side of the well-being debate, so I don't want anyone to have an unnecessary level of anxiety, but I would just let that thought sit with us. As leaders as you are, people who are going to bring about change, if you're not regularly facing fear and overcoming it, then how on earth are we going to get braver and stronger as we go into the bigger challenges that are coming? And possibly, when we're planning our schedules and things ahead, we might think about going off the edge of the map and choosing the dragons that we are going to face and that we're going to fight and that we're going to tame, and the new territories that we will understand on the back of it. And what would be happening if a room of innovators like this were all regularly facing something that scared them? So the center of the book has a framework to it, because I've read many business books, and I just thought that all business books have to have an alliterated framework at the middle of them. So I made one up. But luckily it fit quite nicely. There's a sense of rebellion, right? And if you're going to try and find your other pirates, there's nothing better than to put out an act of rebellion in the world, and you will find the other pirates come to you. Then very quickly there's the act of rewriting rules, because whilst I talk about rule breaking, really this isn't a destructive thing, this is a creative thing, and the making of new rules is really why we're trying to do all of this. And it's the point at which, when people say to me, "Well, isn't Donald Trump a pirate?" I say, no, Donald Trump's a dickhead. Because this is a creative and positive pursuit of finding new ways to do things better. Then there's the reorganization, the redistribution that we've touched on. Pirates were incredible networked organizations. The average size of a pirate crew was less than 100. Yet they took on the entire world. They declared war on the world. And for 30 years they won. And they could crew up to be an army, and they could go back down to their cellular structures. And then at the center of all this redistributed power, they redistributed wealth and decision-making. And then finally, their greatest strength, their ability to tell tall tales that would scare the world into surrender and meant they delivered on their bottom line. And there are many now. I contrast this with lots of modern examples, and from Greta to Chance the Rapper, there are people who are living these values, and the book tries to stay in the present day. But you might also notice that the framework here also gave me my chance for my one really bad pirate joke in the book, because they are, of course, the 5 R's. So bad. It was going so well. Just fucked it up. However, luckily, there's no need to read the book. I can sum it all up in one line, and it's this, the entire book. It doesn't say this on every page. I mean, it gets a bit repetitive towards the end, but the first two-thirds are really good. But the essence is this, and only this. The biggest mistake that I've perceived as I've grown up into this world, and everyone talks of the change that we're going to make, is that when it comes down to it, the reason that we do things is because that's the way things have been done. And when we put forward a new idea, we tried that 2 years ago. And so it must become our mission to really do things differently. Now, it would be all too easy for me to stand up here and say, oh, you should all go and break the fucking rules. You'll be great. Oh, no worries, because I don't have a proper job anymore, and you do. So that wouldn't be right. And I don't want to be, the last thing I want to be is the inspirational speaker. So I'd like to demonstrate how I've lived this myself. 2 years ago, just before the book was out, I found myself in a deeply anxious place. I'd gone through a separation. I'd stepped out from Liberty, where all of my identity was tied up. All the entrepreneurs in the room will know that. It was an incredibly difficult time, and everybody who loved me told me to go and get a proper job. It was a time for some security. I knew that, but as I said at the beginning, you saw me on the dance floor. I've always been here to try and make some kind of difference and never known how. I believed in the spirit of the book. I believed in the workshops that I'd done. I knew that there was something coming back off this. I know that there was a feeling of frustration that I was feeling and others were too, and I thought that there was an answer in what I'd created. And then I was at Penguin, my publisher, Penguin Random House, largest book publisher in Europe. And there I am in this room. This is in the centre of London. The River Thames is a little way down here, and Victoria train station and Buckingham Palace is just up here. It's a major arterial road of 6 lanes of traffic. It's very, very busy. And I was having my first marketing meeting in there, and the marketing director had told me that my new budget was going to be set at 0. And I'm used to working with small budgets, right? But I was like, what is that? What about my billboards, my TV, and like all the stuff that in my little head I thought I was going to get? So I was angry and a bit annoyed and wondering what we might do about it. And I was looking out this window, and my background is in nightclubs and raves. And I thought to myself, I would fly poster the fuck out of that window. It's huge, imagine. So I went and found the building manager, the guy called Trevor, and I said, Trevor, could I put a big poster in there? And Trevor said, no, get out of my building. Health and Safety, Westminster Council, the precedent that you'd set. So I said, okay, Trevor. And I came back that night and I measured it up. And then I got a quote, and it was going to cost £1,750, which was obviously £1,750 more than had been set in my 0 budget. And then all of a sudden I got a call from Tom Weldon, who is the chief executive of the entirety of Penguin Random House. I said, hello, Tom. And he said, hello. And he was really interested. We'd worked with me before as an entrepreneur. He was interested in my insights, having become a published author, from moving from one world to the other. What did I think? I said, I've got lots of thoughts. I think about diversity, about creativity. He said, these are really great. Would you come in and do a talk to my leadership team? I said, Tom, I'd love to, but you'll have to pay me a fee. He said, well, we're publishing your book. I said, yes, but I need £1,750. He said, that's really very precise. What's it for? And I said, I really can't tell you. But we agreed to do the deal, and so I got the poster commissioned, and then I went on Google and I downloaded the Penguin Random House logo, and I stuck it on a piece of paper, and I stole a clipboard from the office, and then I forged a letter from Tom, and it's clearly from me because I'm dyslexic. There's spelling mistakes throughout, and the chief executive of Penguin Random House doesn't make spelling mistakes. But I gave myself permission to install the banner, and so then on the morning of the launch, I bought 4 high-vis vests off Amazon, and I went down to Penguin, and I installed a banner the size of a London bus across this listed building of my publisher on the morning of launch. It took about 90 minutes, and then we ran the hell away. I went back to my office in Brixton, and I was expecting everything. You know what this is like. It's a launch, right? And I've worked with so many young people over the years. I've got lots of young journalists and performers and artists and influencers. You think you've got everyone lined up. You've made the content. You've written the best press release. Nothing happens. Not one hit. No one shows up. My little retweet goes out into nowhere. The phone starts buzzing, but it's not anyone who's going to do me any favors. It's the people at Penguin going, what the hell have you done? You're going to be the first author to lose their book deal on the day of publication. And I begin to think that I've made the biggest mistake of my entire life. I've bet everything on this moment, and it looks like it's just gone wrong. And I decide the only way to get through it is to just keep going. And so that morning, I'm creating more and more content around it. I've got a group of people around me. I managed to land an article that I'd written. We finally made the edit of the video, and it begins to kind of pick off. And then all the young people who said they were going to show up and help me, they wake up about 11:30, and they start retweeting it to their millions of followers. And then it begins to kind of get some traction in the middle of the afternoon, and I land a couple of pieces in Campaign, New Media Age, and then it starts to get some industry press behind it. And then by the time we're into the afternoon, it starts to get some mainstream action. We're starting to galvanize. And as an author, you get the back-end data on Amazon. I can see the little books going like this. Woo! And if any of you know anything about book publishing, there's like hundreds of new books every week. Right? It's crazy. There's such a velocity. And then at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, Sir Richard bloody Branson tweets the thing. Richard Branson, and he kind of takes credit for it, like, this is what we used to do in my day, and I'm like, I don't care by this point. Thank God to his 17 million followers, and then we're suddenly off to the races. The story is out there, and we begin to trend in the UK. We're number 10, then we're number 8, then we're number 5, then we're number 4. So we're all across Twitter, and that begins to have an impact on the Amazon sales, and we break into the top 500 books. We break into the top 200 books. Totally unthinkable, right? There are so many books out every single week. Break into the top 100 books. No one expected this to happen. Well, you head up into the 80s and the 70s. Like in England, there's, like, Jamie Oliver's got 100 books in the top 100 as it is, right? We had no chance of getting anywhere near this. It peaks out in the 60s, and it's about 7 o'clock in the evening. I get a call from Tom Weldon. He says, congratulations, now take it down. Oh, Matt, Tom, come on. Like, 2 weeks, just let me leave it up for a little bit. And he says, no. And here, for those who weren't in our rule-breaking session, I'll give you my first pirate hack for rule-breaking. Sometimes, and when it's those times, when you know it's the right thing to do and you're being told it's the wrong thing to do, when you get a no, pretend you heard go. Right? Just, it was a bad line, it was a whatever it was, and you're just like, all right, thanks very much. You can only get away with it maybe once a year because they'll realize what you're doing. But when you really, really need it, no, go. So, off I went. So one of the areas I was really keen to work on was retail. I grew up working in Alders on a Saturday afternoon. I'd spent a lot of research time in the shops talking to sales assistants. It turns out, for any of the data analysts amongst you, a new bookstore of a new author only stocks 1 book. Like, statistically, how improbable is that? How do you know whether it's sold well? So I took myself and 2 suitcases of books down to all the major bookshops in the centre of London and started reorganising things. So my book was out the same day as Jordan B. Peterson, right? It's a really interesting book, but he's a fucking idiot. So I just covered his up. I got carried away. I started making window displays. I got arrested for this window display, but I could prove to the police that I had more stock than the shop did, so they had to let me off. I got myself on Blinkist. Is anyone here on Blinkist? It's a great German business. Excellent. It's got thousands and thousands of non-business business books on it. Has about 5 million subscribers. I was in a meeting with Penguin. I was like, I want my book on Blinkist. They're like, oh, no. They steal content from authors and they distribute it for free. It's like the Spotify of publishing. It's like, you do know what you just said. Like, if that really is the Spotify of publishing, then I'm definitely on there. So I left that meeting, having been told no, heard go, gave them a call, was the first author to approach Blinkist, first author who was allowed to write their own material for Blinkist, got launched in every single one of their markets to 5 million subscribers, and became an international bestseller. It was International Talk Like a Pirate Day. It's this weird thing where once a year everyone lives up to the cliches of talking like a pirate, which is exactly what this book's about. I didn't have any budget left by this point, so I borrowed all the advertising on the London Underground for the morning. It takes 2 hours exactly to replace nearly every single advert. I gave them all back, obviously, in time, and it meant that look at this handsome, beautiful person. You know when you're like putting together your pitch, and you're like, kind of case study of key, target audience member, just by chance, like, look at this beautiful specimen of man. Anyway, so you're getting distracted. Then it was, did a deal with the US, right? No one on my little imprint in Penguin has ever done a deal out of the UK to the US, only goes the other way. So I thought that was very exciting. I got this great book review in the Times that said the wrong pirates are in charge, and then someone on Twitter who'd read the book DM'd me and said, I've got a 30,000 lumen projector. I was like, dude, I've got 4 high-vis vests. It's a fucking party. So we went down to Parliament with a projector and a high-vis vest, and we cast a 125-foot projector the day before Donald Trump turned up for his first visit to the UK. I was like, woohoo! That was a way to celebrate the US book deal, and then that got me on the news. So there was headline news slot, and there it was a Saturday morning news slot. So I was with Scarlett, and Scarlett I take to drama on a Saturday morning to her theatre class. And I was like, Scarlett, what do you want to do? Do you want to go to drama or do you want to be on the news? She's like, I'll be on the news, Daddy. So I was like, okay. We jumped in the taxi to the studio, and I thought, oh, I haven't asked. So I called the studio and I said, is it right if I bring my 5-year-old daughter on TV with me? They said, no. What are we here? Exactly. So it turns out the unexpected benefit of taking your super cute, like nearly 6-year-old daughter on the news with you is that the clip goes viral, which is a blend of PR and child exploitation. And then the book was out in the States, right, and published now by Simon & Schuster, the biggest publisher in the States. I can't believe how lucky I am. And I'm like, when are you going to bring me over? I've got loads of ideas. They're like, you can stay at home because we've seen your ideas. So I'm back in the UK thinking, how am I going to promote my book in America, right? I start Googling, who are the most influential book reading celebrities in the States? Who's got the most clout of anyone about books in the States? Ryan Gosling. Who would have thought? Bill Gates? Yeah, maybe. How am I going to get my book in the hands of Ryan Gosling? How am I going to get Ryan Gosling to take my book? And I thought, fuck it, I don't need to. I can just Photoshop it. So I went online, and And actually, I just went on Fiverr. And spent $30 with some really nice dude in Bangladesh who's still doing some work with me. And I thought this was bad enough photoshopping that no one was going to take it seriously, but by God they did. And I got some serious no's on the back of this one. But if you're going to get no, you know it's a go. So where on earth are you going to go from this? The only place to go left. She was reviewing her favorite book of 2018, and she was saying it's all about the them and us, and it's about our time to stand up, and it's about our time to make a difference. And I was like, she's basically talking about my book. So with a small bit of motion tracking, and then tagged all of her fan groups. Anyway, you can imagine the fun that I had, and you can imagine that the fun came to an end. The marketing director sat me down and said, listen, Conniff, are you here to sell some bloody books, or are you here to start your movement? And it was a very helpful and clarifying question, because, of course, I was here to start my bloody movement. And I didn't know that at the time. And the thing is, this is a question that many of us face. The topic of, the see-through nature of much of the narrative around purpose, but the meaningfulness that we all seek. Now, the truth is that these are not mutually exclusive. They can both happen, but they do have to happen in the right order. If it becomes about selling our units and then we try and add on some kind of purpose, then that's where it becomes see-through. If it is about our movement, if it is about starting something, then there are business models that can be attached, and maybe in that space we'll find the new business models that we need. But once the cat was out of the bag, the movement certainly started, and within a couple of weeks I got my first response from a reader. It was an email about 2 weeks after the book was out. You can see it there. Thank you for your book, quoting me back. Reading this led me handing in my 1 month's notice. She attached her resignation letter. I said, fuck me, what? I didn't mean it. Except, obviously, I did. And I got in touch with her to make sure that she was going to be okay. But before I could do very much, I got another one. And on every single messaging platform that there is, I began to get more and more. I mean, this guy scared me. I looked him up on LinkedIn. He had, children he was talking about. I was like, dude. And then you look at it again, and I'm like, well, actually, maybe you're right. The last thing the world needs is another person coasting in any kind of corporate, and the thing the world does need is social enterprises with professional experience. So, yeah, all right. And then they started to come thick and fast with a regular drumbeat of people standing up and finding space for their own rebellion. Weird naked guys on Twitter DMing me the rebellions that they were writing in their books. Actually, this is the guy who lent me the 30,000 lumen projector, unsurprisingly. This incredible young woman whose friend had been arrested under an illegal detention order, and they used the 5R framework to get her released. Organizations, the first one was Lego, who got in touch, said, we read about your workshops, would you come and do a session? I was like, dudes, I didn't ever workshop, I workshopped the material. Oh, but it doesn't matter, yeah, I'll come over and we'll do it, we'll work it out on the way. And I found myself an organization from Lego to Sony to Mercedes, places I never would have dreamed of getting anywhere near with these ideas. Institutions in the public sector, in government, in finance, in education, in social housing and care, in investment, people standing up for this moment that we're in, right? Knowing how broad the narrative is outside, and knowing how ineffective the models of change that we've got are inside. Frustrated as I am to go to another bloody transformation away day, write some shit on some post-it notes that is never going to get followed through, and instead take a moment to stand up and take action. Like this guy. I never got back to them all. There are thousands. I just started putting them in an inbox. But I liked his narrative, and I thought the language would sit well with you. That tomorrow is day one. We all know what that means. It's language we're really used to. It's language where a lot of today's conversations go to. And there I had been, 20 years, trying to change the world. I write a silly little paperback pink book, and it changes more worlds than I ever imagined. Not because of me. Not because it's a brilliant book. Like I said, the first part's quite good. But because it gave people a platform to take a decision, and a decision so powerful and bold that tomorrow would be a day one. And that is really the choice of it, I think. A willingness to go over the maps, do something that's going to scare us, truly stand up to what's going on, enact our own rebellions, and find our own way to be a little bit more pirate. So with that, I'll say thank you all very much indeed.